Welcome. Welcome to the Big Book Study Podcast for anyone and everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. We are a step study which meets each week on Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can find our website at primarypurposebigbookstudy.com. I'm Kathleen, and I'm from Colorado. And tonight we have with us Nicole from Texas, Dave from Idaho, Tina from Idaho, and Heather from Saskatchewan, Canada. And we're going to cover step 12 tonight in this podcast. And step 12 is having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Tonight, our format is we're going to use the study guide for step 12. So we will be reading a question and answering the question from the big book, and then commenting. And I'll start us off. What is the main purpose of this book? And it's in the foreword to the first edition. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. And I'm going to pass for now.
Thank you, Kathleen. This is Tina in Idaho. So it's very interesting that it doesn't say here to show Tina precisely how we recovered, to show Kathleen precisely how, to show Dave, to show Bill Wilson. It says to show others precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. And that is how we get better. We get better by carrying this message to others like us who are still suffering. And with that, I will pass.
Okay, let's move on to the second question. Through what means must a recovered addict perfect and enlarge his spiritual life? And this is on page 14 and 15. The answer is through work and self-sacrifice for others. So I'll make a quick comment that this is basically telling us that if we want to enlarge our spiritual life, which to me means if I want to stay close to my higher power, because that's where I'm going to find guidance and everything that I need. And the way that I'm going to stay close is to perform this work to help others, self-sacrifice. So it's no longer about me, and what I want. It's about how can I be helpful and useful to others, and God will take care of the rest. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Kathleen. This is Nicole. I just had a quick comment that a lot of times when we come into this program, if we have, say, codependency, we say, well, that's all I've been doing, right? Is I've been sacrificing for others. But as we work these steps and as we're arriving at step 12, we've begun to digest some truths about ourselves, as they say in the book. And that truth is the self-sacrificing that we've been doing in the past, how much of that was truly free, completely free of any kind of expectation to get anything back in return. Oftentimes when I was self-sacrificing, I was trying to move pieces around on a board, right, to arrange life or other people so that I could get what I wanted, and still do it to this day. So that idea of trying to get love, trying to get approval, trying to get belonging. So the self-sacrificing that we were doing before was self-will, and for us. And then this self-sacrificing is truly being of help and use to another person and others without trying to get something for us. And I'll pass.
Thanks, Nicole. This is Dave. I'm from Idaho, and our program of recovery is the perfect place to practice this concept of getting outside of ourselves. As addicts, we have lived a very self-centered life. Even as it regards to other people, it was always about how that was affecting us, whether they were doing things our way, not doing things our way, whether we were resentful or not resentful, those kinds of things. Now, in our practice within our program, we are simply being helpful and useful for the sake of it. We're not trying to get anything from this. We're not trying to please people to do it. We're certainly not charging money or anything like that. We are practicing purely carrying our message of our experience of working these steps and the results that they have brought to our life. And with that, I'll pass.
This is Tina in Idaho. My comment on this is on page 14. It says that these were revolutionary and drastic proposals. So this is really drastic for us. This idea, most of us don't even really realize how motivated by self, by getting liked, getting loved, getting attention, being number one, getting approval we've been until we start doing this work. And in our fourth and fifth step, our eyes were opened to that reality. So that's why they're saying this is revolutionary and drastic proposals for us to go from this life of this life of trying to wrest satisfaction and happiness out of life by managing situations and other people well, to this life of being of service and this life of giving. And this 12th step is how we learn. We're like babies. We're like in kindergarten. We're just barely learning this new way of life. And with that, I pass.
Okay, thanks everybody. I'm going to read the next question. Even after an addict has recovered as the result of taking the first 11 steps, what action is required in order to survive the certain trials and low spots ahead? And the answer is if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. So when we come into recovery, nowhere in the big book does it promise us that we're going to have this life that never has trouble anymore. That's not what this is about. Life is going to continue to go on as it is. We are just going to learn how to live life as it is instead of fighting it and trying to change it to be what we want it to be or what everybody else wants. We want everybody else to be. So we're going to have difficulties. People are going to pass away. We're going to still have maybe financial troubles from time to time, or problems with work, or difficulties in our relationships, or different things, disasters. There's all kinds of things that are going to continue to happen, but we need a guarantee. And this is what step 12 is, that if we do step 12, we're going to be okay during those trials. And that is absolutely true for me. It keeps me connected to my higher power, my service to others that are still suffering. And not just those that are still suffering, but service, period. As long as I am doing it from a place of give and not get, absolutely, it's easier and easier for me to handle difficulties that come up in my life. And with that, I pass.
Thanks, Kathleen. This is Dave. When we were experiencing trials and low spots in our life, in the past, we turned to that which we thought we found a sense of ease and comfort from. Might be drinking, might be drugs, might be any other addictive behavior. But what we learned is that we couldn't live with that. We're all going to have trials and low spots. And then we find we can't live with the addictive behavior and we can't live without the addictive behavior, because that's what we use when trials and low spots come along. The program of recovery provides us a different alternative, and that is to stay spiritually connected through our trials and our low spots, which happen to everybody in their life all the time, as has been pointed out. It's not possible to live a life without trials and low spots. Nobody does. What it's possible to do is live a life with trials and low spots, which is required, in a way that is sane and healthy and useful to others. And with that, I will pass. Thanks.
This is Tina in Idaho. Thanks, Dave. So this trials and low spot. Okay, wait a second. Number 4. Yeah. Perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others. So in other spots in the book, it tells us that we go from living in the third dimension, which is this dimension of trying to wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world by managing people, places, things, events, etc., to try to get our way. So that's what we've been trying to do. And on page 14, right where it's telling us about this, what Bill Wilson says, while I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given me. So that's part of our awakening. When we have these steps, these instructions for these steps given to us in a very selfless way, when someone is reaching out to us and freely giving this to us, it's a bit of an awakening for us. It's like, wow, this is something entirely different. And so that's what really compels us to give this thing a try. We see the example of our sponsor in this new way of life that then catapults us into the fourth dimension, this dimension of giving rather than getting. And with that, I'll pass.
Okay, thanks, Tina. I'm going to move on to our fourth question in this series on the 12th step. Dave from Idaho, even after an addict has recovered as a result of taking the first 11 steps, what will he surely end up doing if he doesn't immediately begin work with other suffering addicts? And the answer found on page 15 in the big book: he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die. My comment is going to be on the word immediately. I want to emphasize that this is something I experienced from those who helped me. We like to call those people our sponsors. That there is no waiting for a certain period of sobriety. There's no waiting to feel healthy enough now, or to be approved by somebody, or to be quote unquote ready to help carry the message. That we simply start carrying the message and helping other people. And here's the word: immediately. There isn't any 90 days or 6 months or a year, or what if I relapsed, those kinds of things. The word in the instructions is, that if we have 3 days in the program, we could help somebody who's there for their first day. We serve as a sponsor as soon as we have the instructions. And with that, I will pass. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. This is Tina in Idaho. So the answer to this question is he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die. We can also say it, she would surely think again, and if she thought, she would surely die. So if I take time to think, right, my thinking tells me I got nothing to offer. I'm a piece of crap. Who am I? So we're to walk right through our self doubt, right through our self consciousness, right through our self loathing, and seek to be of service again, because that's part of our disease. This think. What we've gotten clear on at this point is we are not going to be able to think our way better. We tried that. So now we're acting our way better. And they're all action steps, and 12 is an incredibly important action step. We just have to take the action. We don't have to think we're going to be good at it. We just got to do it. It says in the book, we grow in understanding and effectiveness. And with that, I'll pass.
Tina, this is Heather in Saskatchewan. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the fact that, it tells us that we need to do this work, because if we don't do it, we will be quickly back into our own thinking, our own heads, our own worries, our own problems. And what we need to do, as we've done with other steps, is we need to do some action. And the book tells us faith without works is dead. And so if we are going to, be part of this program and have this program work for us and with us, we need to do the action. And that is to help others and to be of service to others. Pass.
Thanks, Heather. I'm Dave. I'll go on to question 5. What was the first recovered addict plagued by, even though he had taken the steps and recovered? And on page 15 in the big book, it says, I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. And my comment is, as we've already alluded to, even after we have worked the 12 steps and recovered, the self-seeking, the dishonesty, the story-making, the self-pity, the resentment, the fear that come up for us is not going to be absent. It's not going to go away. And that isn't really possible. That is part of being human. What we have learned is that we now have a program of action that we can use, that we can make use of, that we can turn to when all those words that just came up, self-pity, resentment, and all the rest of them, come up for us. We have a program of action that we can make use of. And with that, I'll pass. Thanks.
Big Kathleen.
Thanks, Dave. I am Kathleen, and I'm going to make a comment about this self-pity and resentment. Yes, it's right around the corner. It's here for us. We've been that way for a long time. And if we aren't working with others, it's going to come right back. And resentment is that when we are angry and resentful that things aren't going our way, that people aren't acting the way we want them to act, that our plan is not happening. And God is either everything or God is nothing. The big book tells us this. So if, we think that we have these ideas that are great, but we have a very, very small perspective. So even when things don't look good at all, like, wow, that's scary, or wow, that is a terrible thing that person is doing, or a terrible thing that's happening in our world or in our country. But higher power has the perspective that is much bigger, and we don't have it. So all day long, there could be things that we feel resentful about. And we can also feel a tremendous amount of self-pity, like we're not getting our way. I just want a relationship, but I don't have one, or all the different ways that we can, think our life is miserable. And these things are right there. So our best assurance is that we work with others, and that self-pity and that resentment will be lifted. And that's true for all of us on this podcast and for many, many, many people that have gone before us. And with that, I pass.
Thanks, Kathleen. I'm Dave. Question 6 on step 12. During these periods of depression and self-pity, what would keep Bill Wilson sober and save the day? And on page 15, the answer is sometimes nearly drove me back to drink. But I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. And my comment is there is an action that we can turn to, even in the trials and low spots, even when resentment and self-pity are present. If we've been present in this program for any length of time, we have names, we have some phone numbers, we have people we can reach out to, people we can call, people we can be helpful to. And this is a new practice for us. This is a new action for us to turn to. Not one that we have a lot of practice or experience with. Not one that we need to be good at. It's just one that we need to try. And with that, I will pass. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. This is Nicole. And, we have this thing, it's part of our insanity that when it comes to our problems and our misery, the way that we're used to going about solving our problems is to keep delving into our problems, researching them, looking them up on the internet, talking to people about our problems, meditating on our problems. And despite the fact that returning to those strategies over and over again has utterly failed us, we don't have any other solution, right? We just keep continuing that practice despite the fact that we only maybe get temporary relief but no permanent solution, no reliable solution. And the other thing is that, it gets to the point when it's our only option that our misery becomes our ease and comfort. We will sit in self-pity, and in some ways it's soothing, right? To just spend time there, because we don't have a solution. And so at least we can eke something out of our self-pity. We can get, someone to side with us, even if it's just ourselves. So this idea of taking this action to turn to somebody else, it's counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense that when we're suffering, that we go and help somebody else, but it is immediate. They say the problem was lifted. And that self-obsession, that self-pity, that resentment is immediately lifted when we put our focus and turn our attention to being useful and of service to somebody else. And I'll pass.
Thank you, Nicole. This is Heather, and we'll move on to question 7. Did he sit around in meetings waiting for a suffering addict to show up, or did he proactively search for someone to help? And the answer is found on page 15. Many times I have gone to my old hospital in despair. And so that was something that worked for Bill in the 1930s, to go to a hospital or an institution to look for people to help. And there is an instruction there for us, is that we have to be actively looking for those that are still suffering. But what does that look like for us today? For us today, it may look like starting a meeting, a Zoom meeting. It may be that we do a podcast. It may be that we put ads on Facebook, that we are here to help. It's going to meetings, sharing our experience, strength, and hope in those meetings. It is taking opportunity when people are suffering or we see them suffering to talk to them about it, and not being afraid to do that because people may think a certain way about us if we do that. We just have to keep looking for the opportunities that higher power presents to us in order for us to help others. And I'll pass.
Thanks, Heather. This is Tina in Idaho. I just had a comment about that. So that proactively searching for someone to help, I was actually given direction from my sponsor that when I would go to meetings, I was to take the name and number of the newcomers down and reach out to as many as possible or as many as necessary that day. Maybe even just text them and say, "Glad you found us. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to help." So just getting out of myself and turning to see if I could be helpful and useful to others. And sometimes that meant that I was texting about 20 people in the evening and afternoon. As soon as I'd get off work, my crazy thinking would come back and I would just start reaching out and get out of myself in that fashion. And with that, I pass.
Thanks, Tina. We'll move on to question 8. What would happen to him after talking to a man who is suffering from the same addiction and carrying the message of hope to him? And again, we're on page 15. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in rough going. The design for living is steps 10, 11, and 12. And my comment around this is that's also talked about in Dr. Bob's Nightmare, where he said it is a pleasure to help others. And that's on page 181. And so here we see the effects of living this life of purpose and service in the fact that, he says, it lifted me up and set me on my feet. And I'll pass.
Thanks, Heather. This is Nicole. It doesn't say that we talk to a man and they accept what we have to offer, or we talk to someone and they get through all the steps. It doesn't say any kind of result or that it's accepted or whatever, fill in the blank. It just says the action, the act of talking to a man and reaching out to be helpful and useful is what set them on their feet, and is a design for living and rough going. And I'll pass.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, a little bit more on that point. My sponsor told me that don't be surprised because it seems like about 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 people are ready. I mean, it takes a lot of misery for us to be ready to, turn this Titanic, our lives around. So if we're not done accumulating misery, we need to probably go accumulate more misery. So I'm really grateful that this step actually tells us the 2 verbs in the 12th step are try and practice. Again, it has no outcome. It's just us getting out of ourselves, our self obsession, our self consciousness, our self loathing, our self doubt, and turning to try to be helpful and useful. And with that, I pass.
Thanks, Tina. We'll go on to number 9. With regards to the true purpose of meetings, why did the founders of the 12-step program meet frequently? We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek, and that's on page 15. And so I think it's important to note is that once we have worked the steps, our purpose for going to a meeting is not to feel better. It's not to share about our problems. Our purpose is to go and to carry this message, to share the solution as humbly as we can, and to help those that need help yet, those that are still suffering. And how we do that, whether we, leave our number and people can contact us, or however that happens, if we share our, our experience, strength, and hope, that's our purpose for going to a meeting. It is not for us to get something out of it, but instead to give the hope of recovery. Pass.
Thank you, Heather. This is Dave. I'm in Idaho. Just a quick comment that herein we find the purpose of going to meetings, as was just stated. This idea of, I've heard it, 90 meetings in 90 days is an example of kind of a slogan. Not a bad piece of advice if we're doing it for the right motive. Because starting with meeting number 2, we can attend with the idea of being helpful to somebody who might be there at meeting number 1. And there we find our motive for going to meetings. It is to meet people like us and be available to them to help them with their recovery, as opposed to us, in the case of meetings, going to meetings to stay sober, or going to meetings to feel better, or going to meetings for any self-seeking reason. And with that, I'll pass. Thanks.
This is Tina in Idaho. Thanks, Dave. So my comment on this is the meetings that we are talking about, our primary purpose meetings, we don't do talk about personal problems. We don't do check-ins. We don't do those kinds of things where we actually are there to carry this message. That's what it says in our steps, as we're carrying this message. And this message is the instructions in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that came with the 12 steps. So in our meetings, we aim for the humility to stay focused on finding the clear-cut directions in the passage covered. And a lot of times that might not please the newcomer, because newcomers might want to be there to spill their guts or whatever. But we're there to be helpful, not to be pleasing. And what we found that's helpful is carrying the message that came with these 12 steps. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Tina. So we are on number 10. Does the act of just going to meetings and getting current on our personal problems hold us together? And the answer is on page 17 in the Big Book of AA. The feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us, but that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. And so my comment is, they're clearly saying here that if they were just joined around having the alcoholic problem or having any kind of addictive problem, that it wouldn't be enough to have carried them forward. That being joined together in carrying the solution is what held them together. And ultimately, we're just a bunch of people, right? We're a bunch of people, humans, and then on top of that, we're a bunch of humans who have addictions. And so, we show up to these gatherings, any kind of gathering, one or more, two or more of us, and we come in with all these old ideas. We're worthless. We don't belong. We're nothing. Nobody cares what we have to say, etc. And then we, again, just has been said, throughout this, we have to kind of walk through that and show up and start bringing solution. Start showing up and belonging because we say we belong. And so, whereas when we're coming in with all of our addictions, we're just competing, we're comparing, we're fighting against those ideas. We're trying to prove those ideas right or wrong. And so they're saying that we're unifying around the solution is the tremendous fact, and I'll pass.
Thanks, Nicole. So I want to make a comment about this. We have, yes, part of step 12 and part of what works about helping others like us is that we are like them, that we have a common problem. We can sit down, alcoholic to alcoholic, codependent to codependent, overeater to overeater, and we have this we know what it's like. And that's what is a huge part of what gets us started in the program. It's like the number one thing that really helps us to engage, is because here is somebody that knows how we feel. So it's an incredibly important thing. However, it's only part of it, and the solution is the other part, which is being said here. And for me, I before recovery, I had a list of women that I could call, upward of 8 or 10 women that I could call and talk about my problem and talk about my misery and that common peril. And many times these women, not always, not all of them, had something similar. But that was never, ever, ever enough. It all it did was bond us in our misery. So yes, it's the glue in our program, our common problem. But we must have the solution. And that's what we need to pass on to others. And with that, I pass.
Thanks, Kathleen. This is Heather. I just wanted to comment on the fact of, just going to meetings or getting current. I think a lot of times there is kind of a cycle that we go through when we're first coming into recovery, where we go to meetings, we get a little self-awareness, we find our people, and we start to feel a little better. And, life goes along and we're feeling good and we think, oh, I got this licked. And then something happens in our life and we get one of those trials and low spots. And we go back to meetings. We do meetings for a while. We get a little more self-aware. We have our people. And maybe we taper off on the meetings, or again, something happens and we're back to a bottom. And so I think, it's clear that just meetings and just getting current are not what are going to get us onto the road of recovery. We have to find a sponsor and work the steps, do the actions that this book lays out. And that's the solution. And that's what we unify around and support each other around. And I'll pass.
Thank you, Heather. Okay, question 11. What should be the focus in our meetings? The tremendous fact. And the answer on page 17 is the tremendous fact for each and every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. And I'll open it up for comments.
This is Tina in Idaho. So this is such new stuff for us. I mean, most of us have come from homes affected by addiction where we are completely bound around problem. This is an entirely new way to belong. And really being about problems is where we got part of our belonging, you know. But now we're learning to be part of or belong around solution. This way out that we can absolutely agree. And we begin this journey, this new journey where we're bound around solution, where we're working side by side, shoulder to shoulder to seek to be helpful and useful. And in our fellowships, we have our business meetings and we seek to carry this message to others who are still suffering from addiction like we were. So it's an entirely new way to be part of, to be bound around solution instead of bound around problem. With that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Tina. This is Dave. Just a comment that we have all had that experience of being bound around problem. Just think about the experience of sitting with others in gossip about a family member, perhaps a coworker or a colleague, perhaps somebody in the community of a different political persuasion, religious practice, whatever. We've all had that experience. We think that is a way to be bound, partly because it's very passive. It's very easy. It's very easy to gossip and sympathize maybe in a false idea of connection around talking about somebody else as a problem. It isn't real connection. It's not real honesty. It's not vulnerable. It's exactly what the English word for it is. It's gossip. It actually disconnects. How would it disconnect? Well, if you're willing to gossip about person C today, you probably would also be willing to gossip about me tomorrow, wouldn't you? It's not a connector. It is a divider. Clearly, it's intuitive. So being bound around problem doesn't work. On the other hand, focusing on solution is new. It's a new practice. It's a new action. And with that, I will pass.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, we're on number 12. Even after an addict has recovered as a result of taking the first 11 steps, what do our very lives depend upon? Page 20. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. So, I mean, for the alcoholics, their very lives might have depended upon turning to be useful to someone else, meaning that next drink might be the one that killed them. If we don't have something that we ingest, if our addiction is behavioral, our very not wanting to live anymore, might manifest that way. We also have this mind-body problem, and we share that with the alcoholics, whatever our addiction is. And we often are at the point, if we have our lives have truly become unmanageable, we may just not want to continue. We may not want to go on. We may not want to be a part of life anymore, meaning isolating. So this new life that we've been given, this recovered state, is a moment to moment thing. It's not that we get recovered by working the steps and then we're all good. We get to go on with our lives and be happy, joyous, and free. Every moment is a decision to turn away from our old ways of behaving, our old thinking, and our old actions, and turning our will, our thinking, and our lives, our actions over to a higher power, which is being of use and service to others. And I'll open it up for comment.
This is Tina in Idaho. So, so this, how we may help meet their needs. It's interesting because it doesn't say how we may please them or how we may get liked by them. So it's now what we're trying to do is be helpful. And that's a whole new thing. It's not the same as what Dave was mentioning just a little bit ago. It's not the same as participating in gossip with others, trying to get liked or belong that way. Now we are learning an entirely new way to belong, and it's a selfless thing. It's like, I'm not here to get anything. I'm here to do what we talked about at the very beginning of this podcast. Bill Wilson in the hospital was thinking there's probably other people that need what was so freely given to me. That's what we're about now. Is there somebody that I can be helpful and useful to and help them the way that I was helped? So, but a lot of times it's not going to be their wants. We're not concerned about people's wants. We're concerned about being genuinely helpful. And with that, I'll pass. Okay, moving on here. Number 13. This is Tina in Idaho. Right before making the decision to begin our recovery, we were offered a new employer, God, and a new job description. The paycheck for doing this job is that God provided what we needed. In return, our job is to keep close to God through steps 3 through 11. And what else? On page 63, to perform his work well. And this is really interesting. It's like the question before. Um, um, it says we were offered a new employer and a new job description. That paycheck for doing this job is that God provided, again, what we needed, not necessarily what we wanted, but what we need. So we're going to be getting what we need. And sometimes, like as with a parent, we don't give a kid everything that they want. We don't give them a lunchbox full of candy. We give them what's healthy. We give them what's helpful. We give them what's good for them. Our love motivates us instead of our desire for immediate gratification or to get somebody to like us. So that's the way our higher power operates with us, the same way we're learning through step 12 to be helpful to others. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Tina. This is Dave. I have actually had people at the juncture of this statement on page 63 ask me, well, perform his work well. That sounds like perform God's work well. Isn't that like impossible, or isn't it really, difficult? And I don't think that's what the writers of the Big Book intended, because God works through us. It's not like we're doing God's work for him. And it's pretty simple. What is God's work? Well, in the context of working the program of recovery, it's carrying the message to those who are still suffering. But even then, we can get caught up with, well, I don't know what the right words are, etc. It's simply maybe two or three things in my experience anyway, and that is be honest. Number two, be compassionate or empathetic, to the person that we're talking to, working with, or our friend or family member for that matter, because we practice these principles in all our affairs. So honest, compassionate, empathetic, and maybe the third one is helpful, useful. If we simply keep it to those three, very simple principles, my finding is it usually goes pretty well. And with that, I'll pass. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. So there's one of the great things about this new job description and this new relationship that we have. If we do these two things, for our paycheck, which is, having everything that we need taken care of. And what it does is it keeps us in this 24 hours too. It's like all we have to do is ask right now, what would you have me do? Who would you have me help? How can I be useful and helpful? And that is, and that might mean useful and helpful might mean take care of our responsibilities that need to be taken care of today. It will absolutely mean being helpful to others in a way that is give and not get. But it keeps us right here and now. Higher power, God, spirit of the universe is here now, not in the future, not in the past. And that conversation that happens in this new relationship with our new employer is right now. And when we're done doing whatever we thought we have been, was performing his work well right now, we ask again. And we're going to have plenty to do. There's plenty to do. That's going to keep us busy. We don't need to go into the future or the past. And with that, I pass.
This is Tina. One more thought about that perform his work well is, this carrying this message to those who still suffer. I mean, I have a tendency to complicate things, offering these 12 steps to somebody who wants them and needs them, and would like the instructions, is a very practical action way to perform his work well. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. 14. In the third step prayer, we made a bargain with God. We asked God to take away my difficulties so that we could do what on page 63? Take away my difficulties, our defects and old ideas, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. And I will pass.
Thanks, Tina. This is Dave. I love the third step prayer. It sets us up for what the purpose or what the motive of our life now is. And that is to take everything that God has brought to our lives up to this point, including all of the pain and all of the suffering and all of the difficult experiences and all of the things we may look upon as trials and low spots, the way it was put earlier. And now God will put them to good use to be helpful to others. Because had we not had those experiences, we wouldn't be in the same position that we in fact are to be helpful and useful. It's really a miracle, an absolute miracle that God would take all of that, we might consider it very dark stuff, perhaps, and make light out of it. And I'm talking about the kind of light that comes from a light bulb, that it would shine a light to others. Number one, as a way that we can connect with them around that pain and that suffering and that experience. And number two, as a way that we can show them a path forward. And with that, I will pass.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, number 15. In the seventh step prayer, we made another bargain with God. We asked God to remove from me every single defect of character in order to increase our usefulness to who? On page 76, it says, I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. And I have a comment. That word useful is wonderful. It is so much the opposite of the way many of us were living. You know, it was definitely very much a contrast to the trying to get liked, trying to get loved, trying to be valued, trying to be number one, trying to compare favorably to others. Now all of that stuff goes by the wayside, is pushed to one side, and this new motive of being useful, and very specifically being useful with carrying this message, the instructions for the 12 steps. It's so wonderful to have such simple, clear marching orders. And with that, I pass.
Tina, I just wanted to comment on the fact of this phrase, you and my fellows. And I think we can take a very, literal, narrow view of fellows to be my fellows in the fellowship of a 12-step program. But I think we need to also kind of widen that perspective out to our families, our communities, and beyond. So again, comes back to practicing these principles in all our affairs. And, that can mean very simple things. It can mean cleaning up your community, picking garbage. It can mean holding the door open. It can be returning a cart for someone else at the grocery store. So our fellows, I think we should include as our fellow human beings that we share this planet with. And I'll pass.
This is Kathleen, and I have a comment. So this is a new way of life, that now we're going to be focusing on higher power and fellows. It's very radical. We're turning our lives upside down. Um, we're allowing higher power to be in charge. We're not in charge anymore. We don't even know what's what is best for higher power and our fellows. We're gonna ask, and we're gonna get that information because we're on step 12, and we've done all these other steps which has helped to clean out our channel so that we can begin to hear the inspirations from our higher power. And uh in the past, we're so much about, well, I want this, I want to make this kind of money, or I want to get this kind of relationship, or I want to have fun and party or whatever. It's like all these things that we want. And now we're moving into, we're not even really considering anymore what we want, because that's always gotten us into trouble. And we're really not considering what is it that other people want. We are learning how to help others and be useful to others in the way that higher power would have us. And that's going to be, in the question before, that's going to be through power, love, and a way of life. And with that, I pass. So we are halfway through, or not even quite halfway through, our step study for step 12. And we are going to make this part 1 and start with part 2 for our next podcast, which will start on question number 16 in the guide. So we have a lot more to learn about what step 12 is, and how we can help others, and what being useful and helpful really is. So please join us for the second half of this step 12 podcast. Thank you for joining us today. And you can find our meetings at primarypurposebigbookstudy.com. We meet each week on Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. Join us on the road of happy destiny. Thanks, everyone.